First question is, you've been associated with the foundation for quite a while. What does the foundation do? What does DF do?
Well, the Dermatology Foundation is the heart and soul of the future of dermatology. It's committed to the development of the next set of leaders in all areas of derm, ranging from clinical investigation to medical derm to pediatric derm, dermatopathology, basic science.
So can you tell me why it's important to have the Dermatology Foundation?
Because there needs to be a transition between individuals coming out of training with great promise and then ultimately becoming independent faculty members. There needs to be a nurturing of these individuals so that they can get some traction on their careers.
Okay. And, why do you feel it's important to continue and have a stream of dermatological research going on?
Well, because the future is in front of us, and we need to really commit ourselves to accelerating along with the accelerating advances that are being made in medicine and medical research. So we've got a hugely talented pool of individuals coming into the specialty. Probably the most competitive specialty to gain entrance into right now, and incredibly talented people of all different flavors. But we just have to give them an opportunity to develop their talents.
Okay. Why do you feel it's important to be a member? Why are you a member of DF?
Because you take pride in your specialty, and you take pride in your specialty not only keeping pace with the advances in medicine, but introducing advances through the eyes of the clinicians and through the interaction between science and the clinical enterprise. And so why do it? Because I think you can only really be an outstanding doctor if you do. If you actually really combine in yourself an interest in the intellectual side, the creative side of medicine and the practice of it.
Which really leads to the next question: is why should every dermatologist be a member of the foundation? Why do you think?
Simplest answer, but it probably requires a little bit of elaboration, is to be the best doctor that the individual can, to serve their patients the best and to do it with pride. In order to really practice medicine at the top level right now, you have to really be completely in tune with the advances that are made, and you have to be partners with the people that are making those advances.
How does the Dermatology Foundation make that link?
Because that's precisely what the Dermatology Foundation is about. It's about that link. It's about cementing the link. It's about saying that medicine, medical research, insights are marching along at an ever-increasing clip. You have to really be part of it. You have to take pride in your specialties, being at the front line, and you have to really endorse it. You have to support it.
So it's more of it's really a collaborative. I mean, people work in their offices, they work with teaching students, and they do that sort of with, as an individual. You're not really, working with dermatologists. It's not like you're on a baseball team where there's 9 other guys. So you're kind of working as an individual, but you're saying that you really need to link with the other people that are in the specialty to perform at your top level. That's an interesting...
So I guess maybe the easiest way to say it is you can memorize everything in the textbook. You can pass your boards. You can be an encyclopedic dermatologist. You may know the literature backwards and forwards. But no one has ever met a patient who actually had the kindness and foresight to read the textbook. So every patient is unique. Every patient requires independent thought. You just don't go into the section in the textbook that happens to have the name that the dermatopathologist attached to that patient's entity and do it like a cookbook. You have to really know what the cells are saying to each other. And you have to really be in touch with the people that make a living out of doing that part of the spectrum.
So why do you think DF is
And it's been extremely successful. And so, very important question, because if you look at other specialties, what's really unique about the Dermatology Foundation is the partnership between the large bulk of the practitioners and the individuals on the front line of trying to understand and apply scientific understanding to the way we treat and diagnose disease. It's a real continuum, and everybody seems to be part of the team. I think we'll come back perhaps in a while to talk about what makes dermatology special. But dermatology is really the broadest of all specialties. And so no one can know everything in the specialty. No one can be an expert in all aspects of it. And yet it all flows together as a continuum. And that continuum includes the science at a fundamental level, dealing with the cells that are the composite parts of normal skin. But when they become aberrant, the cause of disease. So you have to know a lot. You can never really hold on to all of it. And the frontier is moving really fast. It's a tsunami. And so you have to run fast, and you have to have a lot of people as partners in this. People who are hardcore, day in and day out, frontline clinicians, and people that are studying those cells and those molecules and those new treatments, developing those new treatments, because that's what they do, but they always do it with an eye towards treatment, diagnosis, patient care.
So, Doctor, would you please state that the Dermatology Foundation, use that as the beginning, the Dermatology Foundation links, these things together. Can you put that in a statement that we can, potentially use?
Okay, so the Dermatology Foundation links the people that will be directing the future developments in the specialty to the people that will apply them. Often they can even be the same people, but the thing that the Dermatology Foundation is about is moving the frontier of the specialty in a practical way forward.
So that you can solve patients' issues, right?
So that we can be better doctors.
How do you think when you take a look at, how long have you been a member of the DF?
I've been a member of the DF probably for 35 years. I've been a member of the executive committee for 21.
Okay. So how do you think that the work of the DF has impacted dermatology?
Countless ways. You can choose individual advances that have been made, but we're really in the people business. We're in the business of developing leaders in the specialty, and we really concentrate principally on the development of talent, development of creative talent in the specialty. So many of us have been on study sections at the National Institutes of Health, judging on evaluating grants. So we look at the grants, of course, that come in as candidates for funding. But at this particular entry level, we look at the individual through the prism of the grant. And so this is a special circumstance. There are no other levels that I'm aware of in which you apply for funding, support for your career development, for the research, or the special training that you'll get as a subspecialist. But what's different here is the focus on the individual.
Developing a career.
Because this is the beginning. This is the entry point for many of these careers. An individual comes out of a residency in dermatology, may do a postdoctoral fellowship for 1 to 3 years, gaining some special skills, whether it's in research or in a special area of clinical training, and now needs to put out a beachhead in the individual's career. And if the person is going to take a strong shot at becoming a leader and having an academic career, the individual needs to get some more protected time They have responsibilities when they join a faculty as a junior faculty member, but they need time for the creative efforts. And this gives them protected time. It gives them an opportunity to have stronger mentorship during that protected time. It gives them a chance to really develop expertise and confidence. It takes a lot of confidence in yourself. Some might even say a bit irrational confidence to think that you're going to be the individual that makes a huge advance. It's a little bit like someone coming out of high school and saying, I'm going to be heavyweight boxing champion. It doesn't really make necessarily logical sense, but you've got to believe it. And one of the things that the Dermatology Foundation does for these young people is give them the confidence that they competed for these grants, for these career development awards, and they got it. And they got the vote of confidence from people on the panel, the judging panel, that have already done it. It's a huge boost. And that boost is one of the most important things we do.
Well, that was a
Yeah, I can give you there'd be many examples, many examples, but I'd like to cite one or two in particular. So one of our colleagues, who actually is now on the executive committee of the Dermatology Foundation, was in the first group of awardees of the Career Development Awards back in the mid-90s. And so Stuart Lesson, who then subsequently became head of dermatology at the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Philadelphia, focused on an area that I also know well, which is a malignancy of T lymphocytes, a lymphoma that presents through the skin. And he made, through really those initial funding efforts in that Career Development Award, he started in this area, in which he made two substantial, very substantial shaping discoveries and advancements. One was in the diagnosis at a molecular level of cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, and he applied what was relatively new then, a special set of monoclonal antibodies, very, very specific tools to pick out individual molecules that can be of diagnostic importance at the surface of malignant cells. They happen to be called monoclonal antibodies against the beta chain of the T-cell receptor, which is unique to the clone of T-cells that cause the malignancy. Up until that time, we had no way of quickly identifying in tissue section, so biopsies that dermatologists do all the time, but applying these antibodies, we had no way of identifying small numbers of the malignant cells in very difficult to diagnose early skin lesions. That on the one hand could be cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, which is a life-threatening disease, starting in the skin, and on the other hand could have been something as simple as localized allergic skin reactions. And so you have to know. Those are two different stories, but they can look very much alike. And it can be a situation where less than 1% of the cells that are causing the inflammation in the skin are actually malignant. And these antibodies can pick that out. So that was a very substantial advance. Very substantial advance. It also showed us in the long run, and you think that the long run is where you're sitting, but this is really still an early phase, that if 1% of the cells are malignant, what are the other 99% doing? And the other 99% are clearly defensive cells. So the body is trying to defend against the disease, but you have to therefore helped them finish the job. So it was diagnostic, and it was a huge insight. And the Dermatology Foundation, therefore, did several really important things, even in that first set of awards. And we, of course, have had some time to see how that career developed. But what it did was it really advanced a field and advanced that career to the point where Dr. Lessin ultimately was one of the principal originators and developers of the whole Cutaneous T-cell lymphoma society. That's a story that's played out multiple times in different ways, but that's the very first time. And it happens over and over again.
So how did, what's the impact?
Okay, well, I can certainly speak to that because I see it every week, multiple times. Mm-hmm. Patients are referred with a suspicion by the referring dermatologist or other physician, but usually a dermatologist, and dermatopathologist, is this or is this not cutaneous T-cell lymphoma? If it is, at least at the time when my career started, more than 50% of those patients were dead within 5 years. So left alone, which we don't do anymore, but left alone, that's a devastating, life-threatening disease of the first order. And in a practice like mine at Yale, I will see 25 patients in an afternoon, and 23 of them will have cutaneous T-cell lymphoma or be candidates to have cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. So I need to know, what am I treating? Am I treating that disease? And if I'm treating that disease at that early stage, which previously could not have been diagnosed, what do I do to prevent it from getting to the point where it would have been diagnosable before those techniques, a more advanced stage, a more dangerous stage? And we can do actually very, very nice things now. In fact, it became one of the very nicest stories in all of oncology, because now more than 95% of those patients can be taken care of in such a way that they never develop a dangerous phase of the disease. That's very, very special.
Yeah, very significant.
Would not have happened otherwise. Mm-hmm.
That's impressed you. What is it that you feel is impressive?
The awesome capabilities and potential of these individuals. It's never been the same. So the first thing that impresses me is that every single potential candidate for these awards passes through our committee. There are some individuals that we like to encourage to apply, but most of the individuals do apply. So the talent pool that's coming through in all avenues of dermatology and the diversity of their talents is just mind-boggling now. To put it into perspective, and the New York Times never lies. So New York Times has written 2 articles on match day when residents in all specialties match over the last 5 years, and twice they pointed out that dermatology is getting the cream of the crop in terms of certain objective criteria. The median percentile board score for Part 1 and Part 2 of the national boards, a test that all medical students need to take, for dermatology is in the 90th percentile. That's the median. And that's just a crude indication of the amount of competition coming into the specialty. And then there's a subset of those individuals built on that talent, that academic talent, that also have tremendous creative talent and a tremendous motivation to make a difference in the future of the specialty that they're going into. It's that group to come through our application process. So it's a very, very talented group. And we have to really invest in them. You have to invest in that group. They have many options in their careers. And there are challenges. There are huge challenges to tackling that kind of a career. The idea is we need to give them the opportunity to lower the threshold of success. And that success is a success that's going to enrich the entire discipline, affect the entire image of the discipline, and convince us, our patients, and the rest of the medical community that dermatology is doing everything it can to be the most specialty that it can be. I give a lecture every year to the Yale medical students, which started as a lark, but has now become a regularity. And that is that the hardest thing to be in all of medicine, in my view, is the physician that you would go to if you were the patient. Very hard to be that doctor. And so hard, in fact, most doctors would prefer not to even ask the question. Because how many would there be? It's not, where would you send your wife or your kids? And the answer is you would send the closest individuals to you to people that really think about the disease. People that are hardcore practitioners, focused entirely on the patient, but completely devoted to the progress that the specialty is making intellectually. If we actually had all the answers, if when we put a name on the disease, it actually was all you had to do, and then use the treatment that pharma is giving us, if that were the case, we wouldn't have any diseases. The truth of the matter is that we have a long way to go. All these diseases that continue to exist and continue to be problems and continue to devastate lives need to be impacted by progress. And the physicians that we would go to are the ones that are really supporting that progress. And you can support that progress through the Dermatology Foundation.
How so?
Because you support the individuals who are going to be pushing the envelope.
You know, you talk about this creative process, and when I think
I can give you an example. Early in my career, let's go back to this lymphoma, cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. Early in my career, the disease was actually identified because T-cells were for the first time identified. So the first point would be, if you had been treating the disease, which obviously existed before we had ever had an opportunity to understand the science and even identify T-cells, you didn't even know the features of the cells that were causing that malignancy. All you knew is that it was very devastating. Then what happened is a way of communicating, as often happens in cancer, between doctors was set up, and I was part of that, to start out with a staging system, which went 1A, 1B, all the way up to 4A and 4B. And so that puts things into artificial categories. So think artificial, useful categories that allow doctors to communicate about which treatments to use in which stage, how dangerous in a broad sense the stage is. But the reality is that the best doctors dealing with that disease, again, the ones that those of us working in it would go to if we were the patient, don't believe in the staging system that we created. Because, in fact, you might say, have you ever heard of a malignant cell saying to another malignant cell, are you 1A or 1B? It's not the way it is. So there's a communication, there's a language that we speak. It allows us to gain traction on what we do clinically and communicate with each other. But we also really know the artificiality of that. What's really not artificial are the actual genuine scientific features of the pathologic cells that are causing the disease. So you have to really, you have to be creative to be the best possible doctor, because those draconian cells, they're being creative. They're creative in beating you, in beating your drugs. You've got to outsmart them. And the only way to outsmart them is not to go to the cookbook. It's to be in touch with what makes them tick, the language they speak to each other. You've got to be eavesdropping on those cells. And if you're not eavesdropping on those cells, they're going to beat you. So you have to invest in the people that are learning to decipher those hieroglyphics. And it would be really a misunderstanding, a misstatement to think that we have all the answers now. So if you're not a creative doctor, and if you're not in tune and you're not supporting creative medicine, you're missing the point. And the way not to miss the point is to invest in the people that are going to make the advances. Let the experts on the medical scientific advisory group who have had careers in investigative medicine, let them decide who the best candidates are to make a difference, and get behind it. Get behind it. And what's really special is that although we'd like to see every dermatologist in the country investing, what's remarkable is how many already do. So they're called by the Dermatology Foundation the Leaders Society because they actually really are leaders. They're leading the way towards the support of the future and the investment in the future of the specialty. So to invest and become a member of the Leader Society or beyond the Leader Society, because there are additional categories with even more support, you're just investing in yourself and your own career and your own reason for choosing that career.
Would you like to take some water at this point?
I've actually given this some reasonable thought because I have to, once a week at my medical school, one of the department chairmen gives an overview of his or her department. And so what's special about dermatology and what's therefore special about this? Many people think outside of dermatology, but none of the dermatologists that we would be communicating with would think so. Can think of dermatology as a narrow specialty. People go into dermatology these days because they looked around, and dermatology is the broadest of specialties. You can be a pediatric dermatologist. You can be an adult dermatologist. You can be a pathologist and a dermatologist. You can be a surgeon of the first order and a dermatologist. You can be a scientist and a dermatologist. And in most fields, it's very, very difficult to find a large cadre of individuals who are both scientists in the same person and outstanding clinicians. In dermatology, we're doing it day in and day out. And the tight linkage between all of those groups, it is interdisciplinary medicine at its finest. That's what excites me.
Okay. Why do you devote so much of your time, you're volunteering to be on the board? Why do you?
The most important thing that we can do, and simple, it makes me feel good.
Why?
It makes me feel good because we're doing the right thing. I'd be embarrassed to tell you how much time I spend in meetings. And I'd be embarrassed to tell you how little is accomplished at most meetings that academicians are in. Certainly, how little is accomplished when you get a group of chairmen together with a dean. What happens here, every time we get together, every one of the executive committee meetings, we make big decisions that we know are really affecting our discipline and affecting the lives of the individuals that we support. Most of all, affecting the lives of the patients who will be affected by the individuals we're supporting. So, it's terrific.
You've donated a sizable amount to the foundation. Why did you make the sizable donation that you did?
Okay, you should turn this off. I'll tell you the answer for this, and then I'll tell you what actually happened. First one, just to again have a little fun here. What actually happened is I was a new chairman. It was a long time ago. I was having dinner in Colorado after another meeting with Jim Layden. And he told me, you know what we're doing? We've decided to start the Leader Society. And we've decided that dermatologists in those days, this is back in the late 80s, those dermatologists that give $1,000 a year will be in the Leader Society. Now, this was a pretty novel idea at the time. I don't know how, the Dermatology Foundation was pretty small before that. And I remember saying to myself, don't laugh, Rick, but you're not going to give $1,000. And then Jim said to me, that's not on, is it?
Oh, I'll stop if you like.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we can. This is only.
And
Now you ready?
if your children walk to school, if I see any part of that,
No, but what was your, beside the sort of
the reason for doing it is the recognition that that it's the most important thing I could do for the specialty beyond the individual contributions that I can make as a single contributor in my own professional life, is being outside and above yourself, but really pushing the community forward and setting an example. So we are leaders in the classical sense of the specialty, the people that you'll be interviewing here. And if we don't do it, who will? And we believe it's an incredibly important thing to be done collectively. So of course, once you actually get into the awareness, once you become aware of the significance of what these dollars can do in amplification of the quality of the specialty, you begin to realize you have no choice. You have to do it because it's just simply what we're all about.
Well, okay. So the collective group, if everybody, why? What is it? How does the ball get moved forward with these dollars?
To make the dollar, the impact of the dollars manifest to the practitioners in the specialty. To really show them how tightly linked, what their dollar does to what they do. They flow together. There is no line of demarcation. If you invest in the new talent that's going to make you a better doctor, and you realize that, not to invest is to not invest in the importance of being a better doctor. So once you make that connection, it's really hard to imagine why you wouldn't make that choice. And since we do this with so many of our partners in the field, one individual amplifies it further by bringing other individuals, other dermatologists. Say, I get it. This is what my dollars are doing. I might not even fully be able to articulate. I can't articulate many of the advances because they're outside my realm of expertise. But I know how important they are. And we all know that. The number of dermatologists, the percentage of dermatologists who actually go to the national meeting exceeds that, in my understanding, of any other specialty. And that's gone on since the 1930s, when the American Academy began. So dermatologists love to learn. They take close to a week of their personal time and time away from their practices to go to a central place and listen to the lectures. And if you go to the meetings, you can see how intensively they participate in this and how much they want to know, including some of the really basic scientific advances. You find clinicians who are right out there on the front line of care, far away from university centers, sitting in the front row and taking notes with tremendous intensity of the most fundamental lectures. So dermatologists know how important science is. What we simply have to further emphasize to them is how relevant it is, not in the long run, but even in the short run. And then every dermatologist who goes to the academy will realize that that individual, that physician, is benefiting tremendously from the information that was generated from the funding of the Dermatology Foundation, because that's where it started.
What's the short run?
What is the impact directly on an individual's practice? Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number, every year, there are a number of very practical advances that have been made by individuals whose careers followed that line only because of Dermatology Foundation support. So a lot of the advances that we see every year a disproportionate number, came from individuals whose careers started on that pathway through Dermatology Foundation support. It's a little like asking, how many of the New York Yankees played Little League Baseball? Who gave them the start? And then who gave them the next start? Well, once it got to the point that they were really playing significant competitive ball, they had to have coaches, and they had to have a support network. They had to have mentors, and they had to have the facilities. That's what we do. We develop that framework. We develop that foundation. So this is a foundation that creates the foundation.
The foundation of the foundation.
because they're close to having started themselves, and they know that they came into the specialty and competed effectively for their training slots because they were so intellectually interested in the field that they were going to be going into. A tremendous number of the outstanding young people coming into dermatology go to medical school not thinking that they're going to be dermatologists. And while they're in medical school, they're astonished to get exposed to the breadth and the excitement of the field. In order for them to have people following closely in their footsteps, it has to continue to push the frontier forward. It has to be one of the great examples when lectures are being given throughout medical school of how scientific advances are affecting medicine and where they come from. Dermatology has to be mentioned over and over again. And it turns out that it is because of the advances that are being made. You'd be astounded to find out how many of the advances that are being made these days have as their best examples in medical school education skin disease. Started with skin disease or impact skin disease. And that's what the medical students are surprised to hear. Then they look around and they realize that there are very few specialties, if any, impacted as much. So what they have to do is they have to make sure that that chain continues. And if it stops, it will stop fast. It's the lifeline.
So they've got to continue feeding the place that they're coming from and that they're going into in order to keep the advancements coming and to keep the specialty alive and, as you said, moving forward.
So to look at a simple analogy through sports, and here we are with the World Series on. How many of the players on those 25-man rosters were new talent within the last 5 years? What would happen if you shut off the spigot for 5 years? For 1 year, that team wouldn't make it. So the continuous flow of new talent, first-rate talent, world-class talent, is absolutely mandatory. And that's what we're doing. In fact, one of the things that we say as we start the review process every year, looking at the grants that are candidates to be funded, the careers that are candidates to be enhanced and spurred, the fundamental question is, look at these individuals and ask the question, what's the chance in your mind, looking at the application that they wrote, looking at their own features and recommendations and support network, if you fund them, what's the chance that they will one day sit on the committee that you're on? Can they replace you? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to replace you with people that are even better. That's the question, and that's what you need. You can't compete in any walk of life if in fact, you don't have the lifeline. But when the field is moving forward as fast as it is now, and medicine is, in the post-genome era, it's incredibly accelerated. You stop the bicycle, and you fall off the bicycle.
10 o'clock.
Okay, this is the last. Encourage people to give?
Only that it's a crime to see some of the individuals that can't get funded. And to think that what those careers might have become had we just stretched it a little bit further. And I guarantee that anybody who is sitting at the cusp of investing in the Dermatology Foundation, if they actually simply looked below the line of funding, the individuals who don't get the money because they were right at the cusp, they change their mind. Because those individuals have the potential to make huge contributions. So I think that what we need to do is we need to double the amount that we're giving out every year, because then we would more than double the contributions that are being made and more than double our capacity in the near and long-term future to be better doctors.
Very good.